Imagine this. You're at a bar, about to swipe right on a dating app, when a billionaire grabs your hand, crushes your phone into your martini glass, and roars, "I am your only match." That is exactly how Nina's night started. Welcome to Linas Romantasy collection. To my old subscribers, welcome back. And to the new listeners, I am so happy you found us. If you're ready for possessive alphas and a capybara in a tuxedo, please like, share, and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a chapter. I want to know where my pack is hiding. Tell me where you are listening from in the comments below. Now, let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Lasagna Incident. Nina Hart stared into her oven, trying to process the physics of the situation. The lasagna she intended to bake was currently sitting on the counter, cold and uncooked. Occupying the middle rack of the preheated oven, looking utterly serene, was Chills. Chills was a 100-pound capybara. He was also the only male currently residing in Nina's sprawling, achingly empty Chicago penthouse. He blinked slowly, radiating a zen-like calm that suggested he found 375 degrees Fahrenheit to be a mild inconvenience at best. "How?" Nina whispered, grabbing an oven mitt to haul the giant rodent out before he became a roast. "How do you even fit in here, Chills? You're built like a duffel bag full of wet cement." Chills didn't answer. He just let himself be dragged onto the cool tile floor, where he immediately settled down and began chewing on the corner of a restoration hardware catalog. Nina sighed, the sound echoing a little too loudly in the quiet apartment. She was 28, owned the city's premier crisis management PR firm, Hart & Soul, drove a Volvo XC90 that was quite expensive, and her Friday night consisted of rescuing a semi-aquatic mammal from kitchen appliances. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother, Linda. "Did you go out?" Linda asked immediately, bypassing hello. "Your brother Kyle says there's a singles mixer at the Drake. Very upscale, lots of doctors." "I'm making lasagna, Mom," Nina lied, kicking the uncooked pasta dish behind the island so her mother couldn't sense her failure telepathically. "You're 30 next year, Nina. You don't need carbs. You need a +1. Just download the app Kyle set up for you. One swipe. What's the worst that could happen?" Nina looked at Chills, who was now wearing the oven mitt as a hat. The loneliness hit her then, a sharp, cold pang beneath her ribs. She was successful, fiercely independent, and utterly terrified that this giant, silent rodent was the longest relationship she'd ever manage. "Fine," Nina snapped, hanging up. "I'm going out. Chills, try not to flood the bathroom while I'm gone." An hour later, she was perched on a velvet stool at a downtown martini bar, feeling ridiculous in a black dress that cost too much. She opened the dating app. The first profile that popped up glared at her with intense, digitally enhanced handsomeness. Bryce Mercer, 32, CEO, Horizon Tech. He looked slick, dangerous, like the kind of guy who'd leave you with a massive therapy bill. Exactly her type. Her thumb hovered over the like button. "Time to make a mistake," she muttered. Chapter 2. The Sound and the Fury. The bar was a low hum of expensive glassware clinking and muted conversations about stock portfolios. Nina took a sip of her martini, her thumb millimeters from swiping right on Bryce Mercer's perfectly symmetrical face. She never made contact with the screen. A hand, large enough to palm a basketball and radiating scorching heat, clamped over her wrist. The grip wasn't painful, but it was absolute. It was the grip of something that didn't ask permission. Nina gasped, her head whipping around. She found herself staring at a chest, a very broad chest encased in a charcoal Italian suit that probably cost more than her car. She looked up, past a sharp jawline covered in designer stubble, into eyes the color of a stormy Lake Michigan. It was Tyler Sharp. The Tyler Sharp. The reclusive billionaire CEO of Summit Logistics, a company that somehow monopolized global shipping to the point where people joked they could track a single grain of rice across the Atlantic. She'd seen him at charity galas, usually standing in corner shadows, looking like he wanted to murder the hors d'oeuvres. "Excuse me?" Nina tried to yank her wrist back. It was like trying to move a concrete pylon. Tyler didn't look at her. His intense, furious gaze was fixed solely on her phone screen. He looked at Bryce Mercer's picture like it was a personal insult to his entire bloodline. Without a word, Tyler plucked the brand-new iPhone 15 Pro Max from her free hand. He didn't just take it, he crushed it. Nina watched in horrified slow motion as his fist closed. There was a sickening crunch of glass and silicone. He then casually dropped the twisted debris into her half-finished martini. The olive bobbed pathetically among the circuit boards. The bar went dead silent. Tyler leaned in, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that seemed to bypass her ears and resonate directly in her chest cavity. It was barely human. "You don't swipe on him," he growled, his eyes flashing with a strange, predatory gold light before returning to gray. "I am your only match." Chapter 3. Black Card Diplomacy. For 3 seconds, Nina Hart was stunned speechless. She stared at the martini glass where her digital life was currently drowning in vodka. Then, the shock dissipated, replaced by the white-hot fury that had made her the most feared PR specialist in Chicago. She stood up, sliding off the stool to her full height of 5'4", and jammed an index finger into Tyler Sharp's rock-hard pectorals. "Are you insane?" she hissed, oblivious to the terrified bartender cowering behind the shaker. "That was $1,200 of technology. I had client contacts in there. I had photos of my capybara wearing tiny hats that are irreplaceable." Tyler blinked. The overwhelming, suffocating aura of dominance he'd projected a moment ago seemed to glitch. "Capybara? Don't change the subject, you overgrown suit dummy. You owe me a phone, a drink, and a very good reason why I shouldn't call the police and have you arrested for destruction of property and weirdness." Tyler looked down at where her finger was poking his chest. A strange expression crossed his face. It wasn't anger. It looked almost like relief. Like he was glad she wasn't screaming in terror. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, matte black titanium credit card. He held it out to her. "Buy the phone," he said, his voice still deeper than necessary. "Buy the store. Buy Apple. I don't care." Nina snatched the card. "Oh, I will. And I'm ordering the most expensive appetizer on the menu just to spite you." "Good." He gestured toward the door with a nod that felt like a command. "My car is outside. I'm taking you home." "I have an Uber app." "Oh wait, I don't, because you murdered my phone." "It wasn't safe," Tyler said cryptically. He moved closer, crowding her space, inhaling deeply near her hair in a way that was deeply unsettling, yet bizarrely attractive. "He was tracking you." "Who, Bryce?" "It's a dating app, Tyler. That's literally the point." "Not the app," Tyler growled. He embedded a hardline keystroke logger in that specific device's batch. I could smell the lithium overheating from the transmission. "You're insane," Nina whispered. "No," Tyler said, his patience thinning. He placed a hand on the small of her back. The heat of his palm burned through her dress and practically propelled her toward the exit. "You're coming with me. Now." Chapter 4. The Alpha Contact. The ride home in the back of Tyler's Maybach was suffocatingly silent. Tyler sat rigid, staring straight ahead, radiating waves of tension so thick Nina felt like she needed a machete to breathe. Every time she shifted in her seat, his knuckles turned white on his knees. He dropped her off at her building without a word, just a smoldering look that promised, or threatened, that this wasn't over. The next morning, a courier arrived at Nina's penthouse at 7 a.m. sharp. He delivered a small, velvet-lined box containing a brand-new, pre-activated iPhone. Nina turned it on while sipping her coffee. It had restored her iCloud data, which was terrifyingly efficient, but there was one change. Her contacts list had been wiped clean, except for one single entry programmed into favorites. It just read, "The Alpha." "He has got to be kidding me," Nina muttered. She immediately renamed the contact to the ATM and added a clown emoji next to it. She looked around her apartment. It was pristine again, thanks to her cleaning service, but the silence was heavy. "Chills?" she called out. "Chills, where are you, buddy? Please tell me you didn't get into the trash chute again." She found him in the master bathroom. Chills was sitting inside her expensive porcelain soaking tub. He wasn't wet. He was just sitting there, staring blankly at the faucet, looking like a furry philosopher pondering the futility of plumbing. Nina sat on the edge of the tub and scratched the capybara behind his ears. His fur was coarse, like broom bristles. "You know, Chills," she whispered, leaning her forehead against his massive head. "I think I met someone crazier than you last night. He crushed my phone because I looked at another guy's picture. That's a red flag, right? Like a neon red flag waving in a hurricane." Chills let out a soft, whistling sigh and leaned his heavy weight against her leg. "Yeah, you're right," Nina agreed with the silent rodent. "But at least he didn't try to fit inside the toaster oven. The bar is pretty low around here." Her new phone buzzed on the marble counter. A text from the ATM. "Be at Summit Tower at 9 a.m. We need to discuss your contract." Nina scowled at the phone. "I don't have a contract with you, psycho," she fired back. 3 dots appeared immediately. "You do now." Chapter 5. The Summit. Summit Tower was a 60-story monolith of black glass and steel that dominated the Chicago skyline. It looked less like an office building and more like the headquarters for a supervillain corporation. Nina marched into the lobby at 8:55 a.m., wearing her "Don't Mess With Me" red power blazer and 4-inch stilettos that clicked sharply on the polished stone floors. The atmosphere inside Summit Logistics was bizarre. It was incredibly quiet, yet buzzing with frantic energy. Every employee she passed seemed to be male, over 6 feet tall, and built like a linebacker. They all moved with a strange, prowling grace, and when they looked at her, it wasn't the usual corporate once-over. It was like being assessed by a pack of guard dogs. "Nina Hart to see Tyler Sharp," she told the executive assistant, a woman named Vivian who looked terrified of her own shadow. "Oh, yes, the Alpha. Mr. Sharp is expecting you. Top floor, private elevator." Vivian pointed toward a solitary set of brushed steel doors. As Nina approached, 2 enormous security guards wearing ill-fitting suits stepped aside instantly, dipping their heads in a move that looked suspiciously like a bow. "Weirdos," Nina muttered, stepping into the elevator. The doors slid shut. Before the car could ascend, a large hand slapped between the closing doors, forcing them back open. Tyler stepped inside. The elevator suddenly felt the size of a shoebox. He was wearing a navy suit today, cut so precisely it should have been illegal. He took up too much space, breathed too much air. He pressed the button for the penthouse office and turned to face her. They were alone in a metal box hurtling upward at high speed. "You're late," Tyler said. His voice was rough, like he'd been gargling gravel. "I'm 5 minutes early," Nina countered, crossing her arms and refusing to be intimidated by the sheer size of him. "And I don't work for you, Tyler. You can't summon me like one of your minions." Tyler took a step closer, crowding her against the back wall of the elevator. The air around him crackled with static electricity. His scent, cedar, rain, and something wild, washed over her. "You do work for me," he murmured, placing a hand on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. His gray eyes were darkening again, flecks of gold swirling in the iris. "Horizon Tech is about to launch a smear campaign against Summit. I'm hiring heart and soul to handle it. Name your price." Nina's breath hitched. Horizon Tech. That was Bryce Mercer's company. "You destroyed my phone because of a corporate rivalry?" she demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs. From fear or something else entirely, she couldn't tell. Tyler leaned down, his lips inches from her ear. "I destroyed your phone because what's mine doesn't get touched by a fox." Chapter 6. The Fine Print. The air in the elevator was so thick with tension it felt pressurized, like the cabin of a jet right before the oxygen masks drop. Tyler's hand was still planted on the steel wall beside Nina's head, boxing her in. His declaration, "What's mine doesn't get touched by a fox," hung between them, vibrating with a possessiveness that made Nina's knees weaken, a physiological betrayal she immediately resented. "You're speaking in metaphors, Tyler," Nina managed to say, keeping her voice steady despite the rapid drumming of her heart. She pushed his chest, her palms sliding against the expensive silk of his tie. "Bryce Mercer is a snake, not a fox, and I am not a piece of cargo you can just slap a shipping label on and claim." Tyler didn't move. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. The golden flecks in his irises seemed to swirl, hypnotic and terrifying. "I don't use metaphors. And Bryce is smarter than a snake. He's tricky. He steals." "He's a tech CEO," Nina scoffed, ducking under his arm to escape the cage of his body as the elevator doors finally dinged open. "He steals data, not people. If you want me to handle a smear campaign against him, we do this professionally. No more phone smashing. No more creepy stalking." She marched into the penthouse office. It was a cavernous space of black marble, chrome, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. It was stark, cold, and smelled distinctly of him: cedar, rain, and raw power. Tyler followed her, his stride eating up the distance. He looked like a panther stalking a gazelle that had foolishly wandered into his living room. He moved behind his massive desk, regaining his composure, the mask of the billionaire CEO slipping back into place. "Horizon Tech is preparing to leak a story claiming Summit Logistics loses 15% of its cargo to unverified theft," Tyler said, his voice flat and businesslike. "It's a lie. We have never lost a package. Not once." Nina raised an eyebrow, taking a seat opposite him without being asked. She crossed her legs, noting how his eyes tracked the movement. "Never? Tyler, that's statistically impossible. Even Amazon loses socks." "We track by scent, by sensor," he corrected quickly, a muscle feathering in his jaw. "We don't lose things. Bryce knows this. He wants to devalue our stock before the quarterly merger. I need you to kill the story before it breathes." Nina leaned back, tapping a fingernail on the armrest. This was her arena. She knew how to spin a narrative until it was dizzy. "I can do that, but my rates just tripled. Consider it a hazard pay tax for the phone incident." Tyler didn't even blink. He slid a blank check across the obsidian desk. "Write the number, then get to work. You have full access to the building. You have full access to me." "To your team," she corrected, grabbing a pen. "To me," he repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "You report only to me. You look only at me." Nina scribbled a number that was frankly obscene, enough to pay off her mortgage and buy Chills a custom-made swimming pool. She slid it back. Tyler didn't even look at the amount. He signed it. "Welcome to the pack, Nina," he said. The way he said pack made the hair on her arms stand up. Chapter 7. The Home Invasion. 2 days later, Nina was working from home, trying to draft a press release while simultaneously preventing Chills from eating a scented candle. The Capybara had developed a sophisticated taste for midnight jasmine wax, and Nina had spent the last 20 minutes wrestling the jar out of his surprisingly strong, square teeth. "Drop it," she commanded, tugging on the glass jar. "Chills, you are a rodent of dignity. Act like it." Chills stared at her with his soulless, bead-like eyes and clamped down harder. The doorbell rang. Nina groaned. She was wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right." Her hair was in a chaotic bun, held together by a pencil. "Stay," she warned the Capybara, who immediately released the candle and began chewing on the rug instead. She swung the door open, expecting a DoorDash delivery. Instead, she found Tyler Sharp filling her entire doorframe. He was wearing a black t-shirt that strained against his biceps and dark jeans. It was the most casual she had ever seen him, and yet he still looked like he was dressed for a tactical assault. "We need to go over the strategy for the gala," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He carried 2 large paper bags that smelled like Thai food. "Tyler!" Nina scrambled back, trying to smooth her hair. "You can't just show up. I have a doorman. How did you get past old Mr. Henderson?" "I own the building," Tyler said simply, walking into her living room. I bought it this morning. Henderson works for Summit now. He gave me a key. Nina's jaw dropped. You bought my building? Because you wanted a key? Security risk, Tyler muttered, setting the food on the kitchen island. He paused, his nose twitching. He inhaled sharply, his entire body going rigid. The relaxed posture vanished, replaced by lethal tension. Nina, he said, his voice a low growl. There is a male in this apartment. What? No, there isn't. It's just me and… I smell him, Tyler snarled. He spun around, scanning the room, his hands curling into fists. Musky. Earthy. He's hiding. Did you bring someone here? Before Nina could explain, Tyler stormed toward the living room, ready to rip an intruder limb from limb. He rounded the corner to the sofa. He stopped dead. Chills was sitting on the coffee table, not near it, on it. The 100-pound creature was perfectly still, staring at Tyler with zero fear. He looked like a giant, hairy potato that had achieved enlightenment. Tyler stared at the animal. The animal stared at Tyler. What? Tyler whispered, the aggression draining out of him, replaced by pure confusion. Is that? That is Chills, Nina said, walking up behind him and crossing her arms. He's a capybara, and he lives here. He's the male you smelled, you jealous lunatic. Tyler looked from the animal to Nina, then back to the animal. He cautiously extended a hand. Chills didn't flinch. Chills leaned forward and sniffed Tyler's fingers, then let out a soft weep sound and flopped onto his side, exposing his belly. He likes you, Nina noted, surprised. He usually tries to eat the shoes of people he doesn't trust. Tyler looked disturbed. He has no survival instinct. I could be a predator. He's Chills, Nina shrugged. He doesn't believe in predators. Now, are you going to feed me that Thai food, or are you going to keep having a staring contest with my rodent? Chapter 8. The War Room. The drive to Summit Tower had been quiet, but as they stepped into the private elevator, the air became suffocating. Tyler slammed his hand against the emergency stop button. The car jerked to a halt between the 40th and 41st floors. Nina stumbled, grabbing the railing. What are you doing? We have a meeting. We do, Tyler said, turning to face her. His expression was grim, like a man preparing to jump from a cliff. But I can't let you walk into that room blind. You asked me why my security team is so intense. You asked why I crushed your phone. You deserve the truth. Okay, Nina said slowly, clutching her purse. You're scaring me, Tyler. Just tell me, are you in the mob? Is this a money laundering thing? I wish it were that simple. Tyler let out a harsh, dry laugh. He took a step toward her, his gray eyes burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. Nina, Summit Logistics is a cover. The men downstairs, they aren't just bodyguards. They are my pack. Your pack? Nina blinked. Like a fraternity? No, Tyler said, his voice dropping to a rough growl. Like a pack. Biology, Nina. We track shipments by scent. We are stronger, faster, and more aggressive than humans because we aren't fully human. He took a breath, bracing himself. I am a werewolf, he stated, and everyone in that basement is a wolf. Silence stretched in the steel box. Thick, heavy, ridiculous silence. Nina stared at him. She looked at his expensive suit. She looked at his serious face. Then, she burst out laughing. Okay, she wheezed, shaking her head. Okay, you got me. Is this for a TikTok? Is Kyle hiding in the ceiling? That's a good one, Tyler. Werewolf. Very atmospheric. She reached for the emergency button to restart the elevator. Now can we go to work? Tyler didn't move his body, but his hand shot out, catching her wrist. His grip was gentle, but immovable. Look at me, he commanded. The humor died in Nina's throat. She looked up. Tyler's eyes were changing. The stormy gray was being swallowed by a flood of brilliant, molten gold. It wasn't a contact lens trick. The iris was shifting, swirling like liquid fire. A sound vibrated in his chest. a low, resonant thrum that bypassed her ears and rattled her ribcage. It was a growl. A real, deep, predatory growl that no human vocal cord could produce. "I am not joking," Tyler rasped, his voice distorted, deeper, vibrating with power. "I am a predator, and right now, my rival, a fox, is trying to expose us. If he succeeds, we won't be arrested. We will be hunted." Nina stopped breathing. Her brain screamed impossible, but her instincts, the primal lizard brain responsible for survival, screamed truth. He was real. The monster was real. "Oh my God," she whispered, backing up until her shoulders hit the wall. You're serious." "Deadly," Tyler confirmed. The gold faded slowly from his eyes, leaving him looking exhausted. "Most humans run when I tell them. The contract is void if you want to leave. I won't stop you." Nina looked at him. She saw the lethal power, yes, but she also saw a man who was terrified of losing everything. He wasn't looking at her like prey. He was looking at her like she was the only life raft in a storm. Her fear spiked, hot and sharp, but then her professional brain kicked in. "He's being hunted," she thought. "He's vulnerable." "If this gets out," Nina said, her voice trembling, "it's not just a scandal, it's a biological crisis. The government would seize your assets. They'd put you in a cage." Tyler nodded once. "Yes." Nina straightened her blazer. She was shaking, but she forced herself to lock her knees. She treated this like the most hostile boardroom takeover of her career. "I'm not a runner," she said, her voice gaining a fragile strength. "I'm a crisis manager. My job is to protect reputations. If you want me to stay, I'm not just a consultant anymore. I'm your armor. I'm the shield between you and the pitchforks." Tyler stared at her, a mixture of shock and awe dawning on his face. "A shield?" He tested the word. "I accept." He released the emergency button. The elevator hummed back to life and continued its descent. "Double my rate," Nina added, her voice shaking again. "And hazard pay." "Done," Tyler said. The elevator dinged. The door slid open to reveal the war room, a bunker dominated by a massive steel table. Tyler looked at her with a mix of possessiveness and pride. "Welcome to the pack, Shield." Nina stepped out into the room. Around the table sat 6 men who made the security guards in the lobby look like ballerinas. There was Nash, the head of security. There was Marcus, sharpening a knife. They all stopped and looked at Nina. The silence was heavy, predatory. "Gentlemen," Tyler announced, his voice booming with authority. "This is Nina Hart. She knows." Nash stood up, sniffing the air loudly. He looked at Tyler, then at Nina, his lip curling in disgust. "A human? Managing the pack? She smells like fear, Alpha. She's going to crack." Nina's heart was hammering, but Nash's dismissal annoyed her more than his teeth scared her. She knew how to deal with bullies. "I smell like fear because I'm sane," Nina snapped, dropping her briefcase onto the table with a loud thud. "You're a 7-foot wolf man. If I wasn't scared, I'd be an idiot. But I'm also the only person in this room who knows how to talk to a journalist without growling." Nash blinked. Tyler smirked. "I'm not here to be your friend," Nina continued, her voice trembling but loud. "I'm here to make sure you don't get dissected by the government. So, put the knife away, Marcus. You look like a B-movie villain. If we want the public to trust Summit Logistics, you need to look boring, not lethal." Marcus paused, looking at his knife, then at Nina. "She has teeth," Tyler murmured, taking his seat at the head of the table. "I have a plan," Nina corrected, pulling out her tablet, praying she didn't drop it. "Now sit down. We have 12 hours to turn this dungeon into a family-friendly recycling center. And Nash, stop sniffing me. It's an HR violation." Chapter 9: The Family Inquisition. The Green Summit initiative was in full swing, but Nina's mother didn't care about logistics or eco-friendly shipping. She cared about grandchildren. "Dinner, tonight! Your father is grilling," Linda Hart had commanded over the phone. "And bring a date. If you don't, I'm inviting Dr. Evans from the podiatry clinic." Nina was pacing in her office at Summit, rubbing her temples when Tyler walked in. He didn't knock. He never knocked.
"Problem?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe.
"My mother," Nina groaned. "She's threatening me with a podiatrist. I have to go to dinner in the suburbs." "I'll drive," Tyler said immediately. "No," Nina laughed dryly. "Tyler, you are a lot. My family is normal, painfully normal. My dad wears socks with sandals. My brother makes TikToks in the kitchen. You would hate it." "I'm driving," he repeated, grabbing his keys. "I need to meet the people who made you." 2 hours later, Nina's dad, Frank, was standing in the driveway of their modest suburban home, staring at the black Maybach parked next to his rusty Ford F-150. "It's a V12, Tyler said, shaking Frank's hand. He had somehow switched from terrifying alpha to polite, charming billionaire in the span of a car ride. "German engineering, reliable." Frank looked like he was about to cry tears of joy. "V12? Good Lord. Nina, why didn't you tell me he drove a tank?" Inside, the chaos began. Linda Hart was fluttering around Tyler, offering him appetizers and trying to figure out if his tan was natural. It was. Kyle, her 20-year-old brother, was hiding behind the refrigerator, filming Tyler with his phone. "So, Tyler," Linda beamed as they sat down to a dinner of burnt burgers and potato salad. "What do you do? Nina says you work in shipping, like FedEx?" "Something like that," Tyler said, politely eating a burger that was clearly charred to a crisp. He didn't even flinch. "I ensure things get where they need to go." "He owns the company, Mom," Nina mumbled, kicking Tyler under the table because he was staring at her neck again. "Rich and in shipping," Frank nodded approvingly. "Good stability. People always need stuff moved." "Can I interview you for my channel?" Kyle blurted out. "I do day in the life of a CEO content. It would blow up." Tyler turned his gaze to Kyle. It was a slow, predator turn. Kyle froze, lowering his phone. "No cameras," Tyler said softly. It wasn't a request. "Right. No cameras. Cool," Kyle squeaked, retreating into his hoodie. "So," Linda pressed on, oblivious to the fact that a werewolf was eating her potato salad. "How long have you two been dating?" "We aren't," Nina started. "Since the moment I saw her," Tyler interrupted, his voice serious. He reached out and took Nina's hand on top of the table. His grip was warm, heavy, and undeniable. He looked at Linda with total sincerity. "She's the only one for me." Nina felt a blush scorch her cheeks. She tried to pull her hand away, but he held fast. "Oh, Frank, look!" Linda clapped. "He's intense. I love it." Nina kicked him again. Tyler just smirked, squeezing her hand tighter. Chapter 10. The Toxic Leak. The domestic bliss, or domestic terror, depending on how you viewed Tyler's intensity, didn't last long. Monday morning hit with the force of a freight train. Nina was in her office at Hart and Soul when the news alert flashed across every screen in the building. Breaking! Summit Logistics accused of illegal dumping in Lake Michigan. Whistleblower leaks photos. "Here we go," Nina muttered, grabbing her tablet. The photos showed Summit-branded trucks dumping glowing green sludge into the water. It looked horrifying. It also looked incredibly fake to anyone who knew Photoshop, but the public didn't care about pixels. They cared about outrage. Her phone rang. It was Tyler. "I'm going to kill him," Tyler said. No hello, just pure, unadulterated rage. "I'm going to go to Horizon Tower, and I'm going to tear his throat out in the lobby." "No!" Nina yelled, jumping up and grabbing her keys. "Tyler, listen to me. Do not shift. Do not kill anyone. Stay in your office. I'm coming over." "He is mocking us, Nina. He put a Summit logo on a toxic waste barrel. We don't even transport waste." "I know. That's why we're going to win." Nina ran to the elevator, her mind racing a mile a minute. Tyler, if you attack him, you prove you're a monster. If you let me handle this, we prove he's a liar.
Do you trust me? There was a heavy silence on the line. She could hear his breathing, ragged, furious, fighting the animal instinct to destroy the threat.
I trust you, he finally rasped. But if you don't fix this by noon, I'm hunting. Nina hung up and dialed Nash. Nash, get the legal team, and get me the manifest logs for truck 404, the one in the photo. And get the original, unedited security footage from the dock. We're going live in 20 minutes. She arrived at Summit Tower to find chaos. Reporters were swarming the lobby like vultures. The security team, wolves, looked like they were 5 seconds away from causing a massacre. Their eyes were darting, their muscles twitching. Nina plowed through the press, ignoring the microphones shoved in her face. She made it to the elevators and shot up to the penthouse. She found Tyler standing by the window, his hands braced against the glass. The glass was cracking under his grip. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing the stress of his muscles expanding. Tyler, she said softly, closing the door. He turned. His eyes were fully gold. His canines were descended. He was half-shifted, hovering on the brink of losing control. He attacked my pack, Tyler growled, the voice distorted by the shift. He attacked your reputation, Nina corrected, walking toward him slowly, hands raised. And I'm the shield, remember? I'm the asset. Let me do my job. She reached out and placed her hands on his chest, right over his pounding heart. The heat coming off him was incredible. Look at me, she commanded. Not the wolf. You, Tyler. Slowly, painfully, the gold receded. The canines retracted. He slumped forward, resting his forehead on her shoulder, breathing in her scent to ground himself. Fix it, Nina, he whispered into her neck. Before I do. Chapter 11. The Green Defense. Tyler Sharp stood on the podium, looking less like a CEO about to give a press statement and more like a general about to order an execution. His suit was pristine, hiding the fact that 20 minutes ago he had nearly hulked out of his shirt in a fit of supernatural rage. Nina stood just off stage, holding a clipboard like a shield. She caught his eye and made a subtle, relax motion with her hand. Tyler stiffened, took a deep breath that sounded like a vacuum seal breaking, and leaned into the microphone. The allegations made against Summit Logistics are not only false, Tyler's voice boomed, deep and resonant, silencing the gaggle of reporters instantly. They are technically impossible. Nina signaled the tech team. The massive screen behind Tyler lit up. The photo leaked by our anonymous source shows Truck 404 dumping waste, Tyler continued, following the script Nina had drilled into him. However, as you can see from our digital manifest, Summit Logistics does not have a Truck 404. We skipped that number in our fleet specifically because, in coding terms, a 404 means not found. Whoever forged this image has a sense of humor, but not a sense of reality. A ripple of laughter went through the press pool. Nina smirked. It was a small detail she'd caught in the metadata. Bryce's team had been lazy. Furthermore, Tyler said, his eyes scanning the crowd with an intensity that made several cameramen step back. We track every ounce of cargo via biometric sensors. We don't dump, we deliver. And to prove it, Summit is opening its doors. Today. The bay doors of the warehouse behind him rolled up with a dramatic clanking of chains. Nina held her breath. She had spent the last hour screaming at Nash and the security team to hide the tactical gear and put out recycling bins. The reporters swarmed inside. Instead of finding a criminal enterprise, they found a hyper-efficient, spotless facility. The scary security guards were wearing bright green vests and forcing strange smiles that looked painful. Nash was standing by a conveyor belt, holding a clipboard. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face.
Sir, is it true this facility processes hazardous materials?
Nash looked at Nina. Nina widened her eyes. Be nice. Nash cleared his throat, sounding like a cement mixer. No, we process eco-friendly stuff. We love the Earth. The Earth is good.
He looked like he wanted to bite the microphone, but he held it together. Nina let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She walked up to Tyler as the cameras flashed away from him. "You did good," she whispered. "You didn't growl once." Tyler looked down at her, the adrenaline still humming under his skin. He reached out, his hand hovering over her lower back, not quite touching, but radiating heat. "I wanted to. The reporter in the blue tie smells like fear and cheap cologne. It's aggravating." "Well, suppress the urge to maul him," Nina said, checking her phone. The stock price was stabilizing. The toxic waste story was dying a quick death. "We won the battle, Tyler." "But not the war," Tyler murmured, his gaze shifting to the horizon, toward the gleaming spire of Horizon Tech. "The fox is just playing games. He hasn't shown his teeth yet." Chapter 12. The Rival's Invitation. The victory lasted exactly 6 hours. By evening, a courier arrived at Nina's penthouse. He didn't ring the doorbell. He simply slid a sleek, silver envelope under the door. Chills, who had been napping in the foyer, immediately tried to eat it. "Drop it!" Nina commanded, wrestling the slobber-covered envelope from the capybara's jaws. "Chills, honestly, do you have a tapeworm? You just ate a whole bag of carrots." She wiped the saliva off the silver card and opened it. It was an invitation. The Future of Tech Gala, hosted by Bryce Mercer and Horizon Tech. Venue, the Adler Planetarium. Guest of honor, Nina Hart. There was a handwritten note at the bottom in elegant, jagged script. "Bring the wolf. Let's see if he can behave indoors." Nina felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. She dialed Tyler. "Don't go," Tyler said the second he picked up. He didn't even say hello. He likely had trackers that told him the invitation had been delivered. "I have to go," Nina argued, pacing her living room while Chills followed her, hoping for a second chance at the envelope. "If we don't show up, we look guilty. Or worse, we look scared. Bryce wants a reaction. If we hide, he wins." "It's a trap, Nina. A fox doesn't invite a wolf to dinner unless the wolf is on the menu." "Then it's a good thing I'm not a wolf," Nina countered. "I'm a PR specialist, and you're my +1. We are going to walk into that gala, smile for the cameras, and show everyone that Summit Logistics isn't afraid of a little tech company." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, a heavy sigh. "I will pick you up at 7. Wear something distinct." "Distinct?" "Something that smells like you. Strongly, in case the lights go out." The line went dead. Nina stared at the phone. "Dramatic much?" She looked down at Chills. The capybara looked back with his soulful, empty eyes. "I can't leave you here," Nina realized. "The last time I went to a gala, you flooded the bathroom, and if Bryce is playing games, I don't trust my apartment security." She tapped her chin. The invitation didn't say, "no rodents," technically, and under the Americans with Disabilities Act, emotional support animals were allowed almost anywhere if you had enough confidence and a fake vest. "Chills," Nina said, grabbing her laptop to order a custom-sized tuxedo from Amazon Prime. "How do you feel about science museums?" Chills just blinked and let out a soft weep. Chapter 13. The Dress and the Shadow. Getting ready for the gala felt less like preparing for a party and more like armoring up for battle. Nina chose a dress that was equal parts elegance and weapon, a deep emerald silk gown with a slit up the thigh and a neckline that demanded attention. It was distinct, just as Tyler had asked. When the buzzer rang, Nina grabbed her clutch and attached the leash to Chills. The capybara was wearing a miniature tuxedo with a red bow tie. He looked ridiculously dignified. "You look handsome," she told the rodent. "Don't pee on the billionaire." She opened the door. Tyler was standing there. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Tyler was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, emphasizing the terrifying width of his shoulders. But he wasn't looking at Chills. He was looking at Nina. His pupils dilated, swallowing the gray iris until his eyes were almost black. He inhaled deeply, his nostrils flaring. The look on his face was so raw, so hungry, that Nina actually took a step back. "Distinctive," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "It's emerald," Nina managed to say, her breath hitching, "to match your jealousy issues." Tyler stepped into the apartment, the air pressure seemingly dropping around him. He reached out and touched a stray curl of hair near her neck. His fingers were trembling slightly, fighting a massive amount of restraint. "You smell like vanilla and ozone," he murmured, his thumb brushing the pulse point of her throat. "It's maddening." "And you smell like a forest fire," Nina quipped, trying to break the tension before her knees gave out. "Are we going? Or are you going to stand here sniffing me until we're late?" Tyler blinked, the trance breaking. He looked down and finally noticed the 100-pound rodent in formal wear sitting on his shoes. "He is coming?" Tyler asked, staring at Chills. "He's my emotional support capybara," Nina said straight-faced. "I have a certificate I printed off the internet. Besides, Bryce challenged us. Bringing a giant rat is a power move. It shows we don't take him seriously." Tyler's lips twitched. A genuine, rare smile ghosted across his face. "A power move. I like that." He offered her his arm. "Let's go." As they walked to the car, the streets of Chicago were dark. Tyler was hyper-alert, scanning every alleyway, his body acting as a human shield between Nina and the world. "We're being followed," he said quietly as he opened the car door for her. "Paparazzi?" Nina asked. "No," Tyler growled, glancing at a black sedan parked down the block. "Foxes. Stay close to me tonight, Nina. If I tell you to run, you run. Do not argue. Do not ask for a refund. You run." "I'm wearing 4-inch heels, Tyler. I don't run. I power walk aggressively." Tyler didn't laugh this time. He just slammed the heavy armored door shut, sealing them inside his world. Chapter 14. The Tech Expo. The Adler Planetarium was transformed into a futuristic playground. Blue lasers cut through the air, and holograms of spinning galaxies floated above the heads of Chicago's elite. It was loud, flashy, and reeked of money. When Nina and Tyler walked in, the room went quiet. It wasn't just because Tyler Sharp rarely attended parties. It was because he was walking a capybara on a diamond-encrusted leash. Chills trotted along happily, his claws clicking on the marble floor. He stopped to sniff the shoe of a senator who looked too confused to object. "Keep moving," Tyler muttered, his hand a clamp of iron on Nina's lower back. "Bryce is here. I can feel him." "Where?" Nina scanned the crowd. "Everywhere. His scent is woven into the air conditioning. It's synthetic, sickening." "Tyler Sharp!" A voice rang out, smooth as silk and sharp as a razor. Bryce Mercer descended the grand staircase. He was leaner than Tyler, with a predatory grace and eyes that slanted upward in a mischievous, cruel smile. He wore a white suit that stood out against the dark room. "And Nina Hart," Bryce continued, stepping into their personal space. Tyler emitted a low, vibrating sound from his chest, a growl so deep it was felt rather than heard. "Bryce," Nina said, stepping in front of Tyler before he could punch the host. "Lovely party. Very sparkly." "I try," Bryce grinned, his eyes flickering to Chills. "And you brought a pig. How rustic." "He's a capybara," Nina corrected. "And he has better manners than you. He didn't try to frame us for environmental terrorism." Bryce laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Touché. But the night is young, Ms. Hart, and technology is so unpredictable. You never know when a glitch might occur." He looked at Tyler, his smile vanishing. The air between the two men crackled with violent energy. "Enjoy the exhibits," Bryce whispered, "especially the sonic immersion room. It's breathtaking." He vanished into the crowd. "We're leaving," Tyler said instantly. "Now." "We just got here," Nina hissed. "If we leave, he wins. We do one lap, eat a canapé, and then we leave." Tyler looked like he wanted to argue, but Chills suddenly bolted. The capybara had spotted a waiter carrying a tray of shrimp puffs and was pursuing him with surprising speed. "Chills, no!" Nina grabbed the leash, dragged along by the hungry rodent toward the center of the room. "Nina, get back!" Tyler shouted. He abandoned the exit, sprinting through the crowd to catch her before she got too close to the stage. He reached her just as she grabbed Chill's collar directly under the main dome. The lights suddenly dimmed. A spotlight hit the center stage where a massive, strange device shaped like a tuning fork stood. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bryce's voice boomed over the speakers, "prepare to experience sound like never before." Tyler grabbed Nina's arm, ready to haul her and the rat away, but he stiffened. "Nina, cover your ears." Chapter 15. The Sonic Pulse. The warning came too late. The device on the stage didn't play music. It emitted a pulse. To the humans in the room, Nina included, it sounded like a high-pitched whine, annoying but harmless, like a microphone feedback loop. To the werewolves, it was a nuclear bomb. Tyler roared. It wasn't a word. It was a sound of pure agony. He dropped to his knees, his hands clutching his head as if trying to hold his skull together. "Tyler!" Nina screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. Around the room, other men, Tyler's security detail, who had infiltrated the party, were also collapsing. Glasses shattered. The holograms flickered violently. Tyler's body began to convulse. Bones snapped audibly. His tuxedo jacket ripped down the back as his spine elongated. His hands, pressed against the floor, twisted, the fingernails turning into thick, black claws that gouged the marble. "Get away," Tyler gasped, his voice distorted, grinding like tectonic plates. His eyes were glowing a brilliant, terrifying gold. He was shifting, forced into his wolf form by the frequency that was scrambling his brain. Panic erupted in the hall. Guests were screaming, running for the exits as they saw the billionaire CEO's jaw unhinge and reshape into a muzzle. "No!" Nina cried. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "Tyler, focus on me! Don't let the wolf take over! Fight it!" She pressed her forehead against his, ignoring the terrified screams around them. The sound was deafening, a relentless drill boring into her own skull, but for Tyler, it must have been hell. "Look at me!" she commanded, channeling every ounce of her will. Tyler's golden eyes locked onto hers. He was halfway between man and beast, a terrifying hybrid of fur and flesh, teeth and tears. He was trembling, fighting the urge to kill everything in the room to stop the noise. And then there was Chills. In the midst of the chaos, the screaming elites, the shifting wolves, the flashing strobe lights, Chills the capybara walked calmly over to where Tyler lay writhing on the floor. The capybara was completely unaffected by the sonic frequency. He looked at Tyler's terrifying, half-wolf face, sniffed the deadly claws that could shred steel, and then sat down directly underneath Tyler's heaving chest. Chills found a spinach puff that had been dropped on the floor. He began to chew it, loud and wet. Smack, smack, smack. Tyler froze. The wolf brain, confused by the presence of this calm, chewing potato, paused its rampage. The sheer absurdity of the animal's calmness grounded him. "That's it," Nina whispered, stroking Tyler's fur-covered cheek. "Look at Chills. He's not scared. I'm not scared. You are safe." Tyler let out a whimpering breath, his forehead resting on the capybara's back. The monster receded, just an inch, held back by the anchor of a woman and her rodent. But on the balcony above, Bryce looked down, his finger hovering over a button that would crank the frequency to lethal levels. Chapter 16. The Alpha's Anchor. The sound was a physical weight, pressing down on the ballroom floor. Tyler's body was rigid, his muscles bunching and rippling as bones tried to rearrange themselves under the expensive, ruined fabric of his tuxedo. He was vibrating with the effort to not kill everyone in the room. "Harder," Bryce whispered from the balcony. He tapped the tablet in his hand, and the humming noise pitch-shifted into a screeching wail. Tyler howled, a sound that shattered the remaining champagne flutes on the nearby tables. His claws gouged deep trenches into the marble floor. "Tyler!" Nina yelled, pressing her hands over his ears, though she knew it wouldn't stop the frequency. "Listen to my voice! You are not a wolf! You are a CEO! You have a merger on Monday!" It was a ridiculous thing to say to a shifting werewolf, but Nina knew Tyler. He was obsessed with control. She had to appeal to his human obsession with order. Tyler's golden eyes rolled back, focusing on her face. The snout that had begun to elongate shuddered. He was fighting a war inside his own skull. "Pain," he rasped, his voice sounding like two stones grinding together. "Run, Nina, run." "No," she said firmly. She looked down. Chills was still sitting under Tyler's chest. The capybara had finished the shrimp puff and was now sniffing Tyler's deadly, razor-sharp claws with mild curiosity. "Look at Chills!" Nina commanded, grabbing Tyler's face again. "He isn't scared. If the prey isn't running, the predator doesn't need to chase. Do you understand? There is no threat here, just a loud noise." Tyler looked at the rodent. Chills let out a soft weep and rubbed his blocky head against Tyler's trembling arm. The sheer absurdity of the moment, the calm capybara amidst the carnage, created a fracture in the panic. Tyler's breathing hitched. The golden glow in his eyes dimmed slightly, the fur receding from his jawline. "That's it," Nina soothed, stroking the sweat-dampened hair back from his forehead. "You're okay. We're okay." But around them, the rest of the summit security team wasn't as lucky. Nash had fully shifted, a massive gray wolf thrashing into a buffet table. Guests were screaming, filming with shaking hands. The secret was out. The monsters were real. Nina looked up at the balcony. Bryce was smiling, watching his work. He had won. He had exposed them. Nina felt a cold, hard rage settle in her stomach. She stood up, smoothing her emerald dress. She grabbed a heavy silver serving platter from a nearby table. "Tyler, stay with the rat," she ordered. She turned to the screaming crowd. She didn't have a microphone, but she had the mom voice she used on Chills when he tried to eat drywall. "Everybody shut up!" she screamed, hurling the silver platter onto the marble floor. The clang was loud enough to cut through the panic. Chapter 17. The Glitch in Reality. The room froze. 100 terrified socialites stared at the woman in the green dress who had just thrown a serving platter. Behind her, a half-naked billionaire was curled in a fetal position with a capybara, and a giant gray wolf was currently tangled in a tablecloth. Nina walked into the center of the room, her chin high. She pointed a shaking finger at the balcony where Bryce stood. "Ladies and gentlemen!" Nina's voice rang out, confident and utterly fabricated. "Please remain calm. We apologize for the extreme intensity of the immersive experience." She gestured wildly at Nash, the giant wolf. "As you can see, the holographic projection technology provided by Horizon Tech is dangerously realistic, perhaps too realistic for a closed venue." The crowd blinked. A few phones lowered. "Holographic?" someone whispered. "Visual and auditory hallucinations." Nina improvised rapidly, stepping in front of Nash to block him from view. "The sound frequency you just heard stimulates the fear center of the brain. And the physical damage? Animatronics. Hydraulic props hidden in the floor that malfunctioned. Horizon Tech turned this room into a dangerous movie set without safety protocols." She spun around to face the security team, who were groaning on the floor. "Cut the feed!" she yelled at nobody in particular. "Bryce, turn it off! Your prototype is malfunctioning. You're hurting the actors!" Bryce's smile vanished. He leaned over the railing. "What are you doing? They are shifting. Look at them!" "We're looking at your incompetence, Bryce," Nina shouted back, seizing the narrative by the throat. "You promised a virtual reality showcase, not a mass panic attack. Turn off the sound before I sue you for every penny Horizon Tech has." The crowd's fear shifted to confusion, then to outrage, at Bryce. The narrative made sense to them. Rich tech moguls were always testing dangerous things. It was easier to believe in bad tech than real werewolves. "It's fake?" a woman asked, looking at Nash. Nash, sensing the shift in the room, stopped growling and sat down, looking confused. Optical illusions, Nina confirmed, sweating profusely. Smoke and mirrors, and terrible wiring. She turned back to Tyler. He had managed to sit up. He looked wrecked, but human. His eyes were gray again. He stared at her, awe written all over his exhausted face. Get Nash, Nina hissed at him, helping him stand. Get the team. We leave, now, before the hallucination wears off. Tyler nodded. He grabbed a tablecloth from a nearby table and draped it over his shredded shoulders to hide the damage. He scooped up Chills in one arm and grabbed Nash by the scruff of his neck with the other. Show's over, Nina announced, herding her pack of monsters toward the exit. Refunds will be processed by Horizon Tech. Chapter 18. The Safe House. The ride back to Summit Tower was silent, save for the heavy breathing of 5 recovering werewolves and the sound of Chills chewing on the leather upholstery of the SUV. When they reached the penthouse, the adrenaline finally crashed. Nash collapsed onto a sofa, still half naked because his suit had shredded. Tyler walked straight to the wet bar, poured a glass of amber liquid, and downed it in one swallow. Nina locked the door and leaned against it, her legs finally giving out. She slid down to the floor, her emerald dress pooling around her like a puddle of green ink. Optical illusions, Tyler said. He turned around, leaning against the counter. His shirt hung in tatters, exposing the bruised skin where his transformation had been forced back. You told the mayor of Chicago that I was a hallucination caused by bad wiring. It worked, didn't it? Nina said, her voice trembling. They stopped screaming. They started tweeting complaints about Bryce's tech. Tyler crossed the room. He moved slowly, like every joint hurt. He stopped in front of her and crouched down. He didn't touch her. He just looked at her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. You stood between a pack of feral wolves and a crowd, he murmured. You didn't run. You lied to the world to protect us. I'm a PR specialist, Tyler, Nina whispered, reaching out to touch his bruised shoulder. Lying is my superpower. And you listened to me. You came back. I heard you, he corrected. He turned his head, pressing a kiss into the palm of her hand. It was a gesture of absolute submission. The noise, it was everywhere. But your voice was louder. You anchored me. The intimacy of the moment was thick enough to choke on. Tyler's eyes were dark, swirling with emotion that went far beyond gratitude. Then, a loud crunch broke the silence. They both looked over. Chills had found a decorative obsidian sphere on Tyler's coffee table and was currently trying to fit the whole thing in his mouth. Tyler sighed, the tension breaking. I need to buy cheaper furniture. You need to put some ice on your back, Nina said, standing up and pulling him with her. And then we need to figure out how to kill Bryce. Legally, or at least, quietly. Tyler's face hardened. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating look of the alpha. Oh, Bryce is already dead, Tyler said softly. He just doesn't know it yet. Tyler, no murder, Nina warned. I didn't kill him. He walked toward his desk, his expression grim. But while he was busy playing DJ at the planetarium, my logistics team was busy visiting his penthouse. Chapter 19. The Morning After. The next morning, the news cycle was chaotic. Half the headlines screamed, Horizon Tech Gala Disaster, Sonic Weapon? While the other half asked, Was the wolf real? Experts debate mass hysteria. Nina had spent the night at the penthouse, mostly fielding calls and ensuring Nash didn't accidentally eat the cleaning lady. She walked into the kitchen to find Tyler making coffee. He was shirtless, his back a map of fading bruises, wearing sweatpants that hung low on his hips. You look terrible, Nina said affectionately, pouring herself a cup. I feel like I went 10 rounds with a freight train, Tyler admitted, but it was worth it. Worth it? Tyler, we barely survived. If Bryce tries that again... He won't, Tyler said, turning to face her. He looked strangely smug. Bryce is a kitsune, A fox spirit. Do you know how their magic works? Nina shook her head. I assumed it was just innate?
Like your grumpiness.
No. Foxes bind their power to an object. A star ball, or a soul pearl. It holds their accumulated essence. Without it, they are just men. Weak men. Bryce kept his in a vault in his apartment. He thought it was safe because he was at the gala. Nina's eyes widened. You robbed him? While he was attacking us? I didn't rob him, Tyler corrected, sipping his coffee. I simply relocated some assets. My team infiltrated his penthouse while the sonic pulse was active. Bryce was too focused on torturing me to notice his own security alarms going off. So you have it? Nina asked, looking around the kitchen as if expecting a magical glowing orb to be sitting next to the toaster. Where is it? Is it safe? Tyler smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It's not here. If I kept it, he could track it. He could come for it. So where is it? I put it in the system, Tyler said. The system? Summit Logistics, the global shipping network. Tyler checked his watch. I believe his soul is currently on a pallet in a distribution center in Memphis. Nina stared at him. You shipped his soul? I chose the Super Saver Economy tier, Tyler added, his eyes dancing with malicious glee. No tracking number, no insurance. Estimated delivery, 6 to 8 weeks, maybe. Nina burst out laughing. It started as a giggle and erupted into a full-blown cackle. She leaned against the counter, clutching her stomach. You are petty. You are so petty. I am efficient, Tyler said, pulling her into his arms. And now, we wait for him to realize he's running on empty. Chapter 20. Return to Sender. An hour later, the elevator to the penthouse chimed. The door slid open to reveal Bryce Mercer. He looked awful. His white suit was rumpled, his hair was a mess, and he was sweating profoundly. He didn't stride in like a conqueror, he stumbled in like a man who had just run a marathon. Nash and the security team immediately bristled, stepping forward, but Tyler held up a hand. Let him in, Tyler said, sitting behind his desk, looking every inch the king. Bryce marched up to the desk, slamming his hands down. Where is it, Sharp? I know you took it. Good morning, Bryce, Tyler said calmly, not looking up from a file he was reading. Did you see the news? Horizon Tech stock is down 12%. People don't like faulty wiring. Give me the pearl, Bryce screamed. He tried to summon a flicker of foxfire in his hand, but all that came out was a pathetic spark, like a dying lighter. He stared at his hand in horror. Ah, Tyler noted. Battery is running low? You can't do this, Bryce hissed, panic entering his eyes. If I'm separated from it for too long, I age. I lose my glamour. I become mundane. Should have thought of that before you tried to scramble my brain, Tyler said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a single slip of paper. He slid it across the desk. It was a shipping receipt. What is this? Bryce snatched it up. That, Tyler explained, leaning back in his chair, is a confirmation for a package weighing exactly 4.2 ounces. It contains a round, pearlescent object. It was shipped via Summit Logistics International Sea Freight, economy class. Bryce scanned the paper, his hands shaking. Destination Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia? Are you insane? It was the cheapest option, Tyler shrugged apologetically. And I shuffled the labels. It might go to Mongolia, or it might go to a warehouse in New Jersey, or it might get stuck in customs in Brazil. You know how the supply chain is these days. Very unpredictable. Bryce looked like he was going to vomit. You mailed my magic to Mongolia? I suggest you get moving, Tyler said, checking his watch again. If you leave now, you might catch a flight. You have a lot of warehouses to check, Bryce. Summit has 4,000 locations worldwide. Bryce looked at Tyler, then at Nina, who was sitting on the sofa petting Chills. You're monsters, Bryce whispered. No, Nina said cheerfully. We're logistics experts, and you are officially out of business in Chicago. Bryce turned and ran. He didn't even take the elevator. He bolted for the stairs, presumably to sprint to the airport. Tyler watched him go, then picked up his phone. Vivian, cancel the alert on Bryce Mercer. He's no longer a threat. He's just a customer looking for a lost package. Chapter 21. The Cleanup Crew. With Bryce Mercer currently trapped in a middle seat in economy class flying towards Mongolia, the immediate threat to Summit Logistics was gone. However, the mess he left behind was colossal. Nina spent the next 48 hours living in the Summit conference room. She had replaced her ruined emerald gown with a sharp navy pantsuit that screamed, "I am handling this," though she was fueled entirely by espresso and adrenaline. "Status report," Nina barked, pointing a pen at Nash. The terrifying head of security, who was currently wearing a bandage over his nose where he'd hit the buffet table, straightened up. "Horizon Tech stock has plummeted 40%. Their board is panicking. They're claiming Bryce had a mental breakdown caused by experimental frequencies." "Good," Nina nodded, typing furiously on her laptop. "We lean into that. We release a statement expressing our deep concern for Mr. Mercer's mental health. We offer Summit's logistics network to help return any malfunctioning Horizon products. We kill them with kindness." Tyler sat at the head of the table. He hadn't said a word in an hour. He was simply watching her. His intensity was a physical weight in the room, heavy and warm. He wasn't looking at the screens. He was watching her hands move, watching the way she bit her lip when she was thinking, watching the way she commanded his pack with zero fear. "You're staring," Nina muttered, without looking up. "I'm appreciating," Tyler corrected, his voice low. "You dismantled a tech empire in 2 days using nothing but press releases and sarcasm." "It's what you pay me for," Nina said, finally closing her laptop. She rubbed her temples. "Okay, the narrative is set. The public thinks the wolves were holograms, Bryce is crazy, and Summit is the victim. I think I'm done." "Not quite," Tyler said, standing up. The sound of his chair scraping back made the other men in the room flinch. "The public is handled, but the board is not." Nina froze. "The board? You mean the shareholders?" "I mean the elders," Tyler said, his face hardening. "The Summit Pack isn't just a company, it's a hierarchy, and they saw a human female giving orders to an alpha during a crisis. They want a meeting." "Great," Nina sighed, grabbing her coffee cup. "More scary men in suits. Do I need to bring a treat? Does Chills need to wear a tie?" "Chills stays here," Tyler ordered. The Capybara was currently asleep under the conference table, using Nash's combat boot as a pillow. "This isn't a social call, Nina. They are coming to see if you are a liability. They want to see if you are worthy of the position." "What position?" Nina asked. "I'm a consultant." Tyler walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her. He leaned down, bracing his hands on the armrest of her chair, trapping her. "You aren't a consultant anymore," he whispered, his eyes flashing gold. "You're the woman who commanded the Alpha. That makes you a target. Or a queen. Today, we find out which." Chapter 22. The Boardroom. Proving the board of directors for Summit Logistics met on the 60th floor, in a room that looked less like an office and more like a medieval throne room transported into the 21st century. The table was made of ancient oak, and the 3 men sitting at it looked like they had been carving empires since the Bronze Age. There was Victor, a man with white hair and eyes like flint. There was Bertram, an older man who looked like a retired boxer, and Raymond, who wore a 3-piece suit and tapped a gold pen rhythmically. When Nina walked in, followed by Tyler, the air temperature seemed to drop. "She is small," Victor said immediately. He didn't look at Nina, he looked at Tyler. "And she is human. You let a human dictate pack movements during a shift event. It is a sign of weakness, Tyler." Tyler growled, a low vibration that shook the water glasses. "It was a strategy, Victor. She saved the pack from exposure." "She lied," Raymond said smoothly. "She spun a tale. But can she lead? Aluna does not just arrange flowers and press releases. She must understand the weight of the territory." Nina stepped forward. She didn't wait for Tyler to defend her. She placed her briefcase on the ancient table with a loud thwack. "I'm not here to arrange flowers," Nina said, her voice clear and cutting. "And I'm not here to measure claws with you gentlemen. I'm here to tell you that without me, your stock portfolio would be dust right now." Victor narrowed his eyes. "You speak out of turn." "I speak when I have the floor," Nina countered. She pulled a remote from her pocket and clicked it. The smart glass wall of the room turned into a massive digital display. "This," Nina pointed to a graph, "is the projected loss if the public had discovered the truth about the gala. Summit would be dissolved. You would be hunted. Your assets frozen." She clicked again. "This is the current trajectory. Up 12%. Why? Because I didn't just hide the truth, I weaponized it. I made Summit look like the stable, boring alternative to Horizon's chaos. I didn't just save your secrets, Victor. I saved your dividends." She leaned over the table, staring directly into the old wolf's flinty eyes. "You can call me human. You can call me small. But don't you dare call me a liability when I am the only reason you aren't currently being dissected by the government." Silence stretched in the room. Thick, heavy silence. Tyler watched from the corner, his arms crossed, a look of pure, unadulterated pride burning on his face. Victor stared at Nina for a long, agonizing minute. Then he looked at the stock graph. Then back at Nina. "She has teeth," Victor grunted, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "She bites," Tyler added, stepping up beside her and placing a hand on her shoulder. "And she is mine." Victor nodded slowly. "Very well. The asset is verified. Welcome to the board, Ms. Hart." Chapter 23. The Hostile Takeover, Domestic Edition. Surviving the board meeting was exhausting. Nina just wanted to go home, put on her ugly pajamas, and eat ice cream with chills. Tyler drove her back to her apartment building, but when she got to her floor, the door to her apartment was wide open. "What the?" Nina rushed forward, expecting a burglary. Instead, she found chaos. But it was organized chaos. Men in Summit Logistics uniforms, specifically the scary security guys, now wearing moving straps, were efficiently packing up her entire life. Nash was carefully wrapping her collection of ceramic mugs in bubble wrap. Marcus, the knife guy, was folding her underwear with terrifying precision. "Put that down!" Nina shrieked, snatching a bra out of Marcus's hand. "What are you doing? Who told you to touch my things?" "I did," Tyler said, walking in behind her. He looked completely unbothered. He stepped over a box of books. "You don't live here anymore." Nina spun around, her bra still dangling from her hand. "Excuse me? I signed a lease. I have plants. I have a routine." "Your routine is unsafe," Tyler stated calmly. "Bryce is gone, but the vacuum of power attracts others. And now that the board has recognized you, you are a target. Even with Summit security at the door, that building has too many access points. It's a sieve." "So you're just kidnapping me? Again?" "I'm relocating assets," Tyler corrected, "to the penthouse. It has reinforced steel doors, biometric scanners, and a private elevator." "And what about Chills?" Nina pointed to the capybara, who was currently sitting inside a moving box, being carried by two large wolves like he was a pharaoh. "He has his own room," Tyler said. "I had the contractors install a heated indoor pool for him this morning, and a radiant heat floor." Nina paused. She looked at Chills. The rodent looked happier than he had ever been in his life. He was practically vibrating with joy at being carried. "You bought my dog, rodent, a heated pool?" Nina asked, her anger deflating slightly. "He anchors the pack," Tyler shrugged, as if it were a tactical decision. "Nash likes him. It improves morale." I can't just move in with you, Tyler. We haven't even—" She trailed off, her face flushing. "We haven't even had a date that didn't involve a felony or a PR crisis." Tyler stepped closer, crowding her against a stack of boxes. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then let's start there," he murmured. "Move in. Let me protect you. Let me spoil the rat. And I promise tonight, no felonies. Just dinner. And you." Nina looked at his gray eyes, pleading beneath the dominance. She looked at Nash carefully packing her scented candles. She looked at Chills being treated like a king. "Fine," she sighed. "But if Chills hates the pool, we're moving back." Chapter 24. The Surrender. The penthouse was quiet. The movers had gone. Chills was indeed in his new room, floating blissfully in a custom-tiled wading pool that cost more than Nina's car. Nina stood by the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. She held a glass of wine, but her hand was shaking slightly. She was here. She had moved in. It felt permanent. And for a woman who had spent her entire adult life building walls of independence, relying on no one but herself, it was terrifying. "You're overthinking." Tyler's voice came from the shadows. He walked into the light. He had showered and changed into loose gray sweatpants and a white t-shirt. He looked softer, human, but the raw magnetism was still there, pulling at her like gravity. "I'm not overthinking," Nina lied, turning to face him. "I'm just assessing the strategic implications of cohabitation." Tyler chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. He walked over and took the wine glass from her hand, setting it on the table. Then he took her hands in his. "You're scared," he said simply. "Not of the wolves. Not of Bryce. You're scared of this." "I'm not used to needing people," Nina whispered, looking down at their joined hands. "I handle crises, Tyler. I don't let people handle me. I talk to a capybara because he doesn't expect anything from me. You're an alpha. You take up so much space. If I let you in, I'm afraid I'll disappear." Tyler lifted her chin with a gentle finger. "Nina, look at me." She looked. His eyes were open, vulnerable. "You anchored me in the chaos," he said softly. "When the wolf wanted to destroy everything, you were the only thing that kept me human. You don't disappear in my shadow. You are the only reason I have a light." He leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "I am lonely too, Nina. I have a pack of hundreds, and I have never been more alone until you yelled at me for breaking your phone." The confession broke the last dam inside her. The loneliness she had hidden behind her wit and her career, the nights spent talking to Chills, it all rushed to the surface. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay?" "Okay, you can have me." Tyler didn't wait. He kissed her, and it wasn't like the aggressive, possessive energy of the elevator. It was slow. It was reverent. It was the taste of a man who had been starving for a lifetime, finally finding sustenance. He lifted her up, her legs wrapping instinctively around his waist, and carried her to the bedroom. There was no growling tonight, just the intoxicating, desperate heat of two people who had finally stopped fighting the current and let themselves drown in it. Chapter 25. The New Hierarchy. The next morning, Nina woke up feeling heavy. Not emotionally heavy, physically heavy. She opened her eyes to find a massive arm draped over her waist, pinning her to the mattress. Tyler was still asleep, face buried in the pillow, looking impossibly peaceful. But there was another weight. Chills was sleeping on top of Tyler's legs. The capybara must have escaped his pool room during the night and decided to join the pile. Nina smiled, extricating herself carefully. She grabbed Tyler's shirt from the floor, it swallowed her whole, and padded out to the kitchen to get coffee. She expected the penthouse to be empty. It wasn't. Nash was in the kitchen. So was Marcus. And Vivian. They were all standing around the island, looking nervous. When Nina walked in, wearing nothing but an oversized t-shirt and messy hair, the entire room snapped to attention. "Good morning, Luna," Nash boomed, bowing his head slightly. Nina nearly dropped her mug. "Don't call me that. It's too early for titles. What are you guys doing here?" "We brought offerings," Marcus said, gesturing to the counter. There were 3 boxes of high-end donuts, a tray of Starbucks coffees, and a basket of gourmet vegetables? "For the capybara," Marcus explained solemnly, pointing to the veggies. Nash says he likes kale. Nina blinked. You're bringing tribute to my pet? He is the anchor, Nash said with total seriousness. He sat beneath the alpha during the frequency. He is powerful. Nina fought the urge to laugh hysterically. The most lethal werewolves in Chicago were terrified of, and worshipping, her potato-shaped rodent. Okay, Nina said, grabbing a donut. Nash, you can give the kale to Chills, but if you wake up Tyler, I will end you. Understood, Nash whispered. Just then, Tyler walked in. He was wearing sweatpants and looking groggy. He saw his entire security team in his kitchen. He saw them bowing to Nina. He saw Marcus arranging kale on a plate for the capybara. What is happening? Tyler croaked. I think, Nina said, taking a bite of a glazed donut, that I just staged a coup. They like me better than you. Tyler looked at his team. They looked at Nina with adoration. They respect the asset, Tyler grumbled, walking over to wrap his arms around Nina from behind, burying his face in her neck. And they better, because if anyone forgets to bring you coffee, they're fired. You hear that, boys? Nina grinned at the terrifying wolves. Coffee, black, 2 sugars. Nash scrambled to the coffee tray. Yes, Luna. Tyler groaned into her hair. I've created a monster. No, Nina corrected, leaning back into him. You just found the right match. Chapter 26. The Cult of the Capybara. For an apex predator, Tyler Sharp was dealing with a humiliating amount of jealousy toward a rodent. It had been 3 days since Nina moved into the penthouse. In that time, Summit Logistics had undergone a cultural revolution. The security team, lethal, 250-pound werewolves who could rip a car door off its hinges, had formed what could only be described as a cult around Chills. Tyler walked into the kitchen at 7 a.m. expecting coffee. Instead, he found Nash and Marcus huddled over the kitchen island, speaking in hushed, reverent tones. He likes the organic carrots better, Nash whispered, slicing a vegetable with a combat knife. The texture is crunchier. It soothes his spirit. I think he needs a humidifier, Marcus replied gravely. His coat looks dry. The dryness disrupts the zen. What are you doing? Tyler asked, his voice deadpan. The 2 giants jumped. Nash quickly hid the carrots behind his back. Morning, Alpha. Just preparing rations for the anchor. The anchor? Tyler repeated, rubbing his temples. He is a capybara, Nash. He is a semi-aquatic rodent who drinks toilet water if we leave the lid up. He is not a deity. He sat beneath you during the frequency, Marcus pointed out, eyes wide. He looked into the abyss and ate a shrimp puff. He is clearly an ancient soul in a fursuit. We aspire to be untroubled. Tyler groaned. Where is Nina? The Luna is in the shower, Nash reported, and Chills is meditating. Tyler looked over at the living room. Chills was currently lying on his side on the $10,000 Italian leather sofa, looking like a bloated potato. He was wearing a tiny Summit Logistics t-shirt that someone had clearly custom-made for him. Did you make him a shirt? Tyler asked, pointing a trembling finger. It's for morale, boss, Nash said defensively. The team feels safer when he's in uniform. Tyler walked over to the sofa. Chills opened one eye, let out a soft weep, and went back to sleep. Tyler sighed. He couldn't even be mad. The penthouse was peaceful. The frantic energy that usually plagued the pack after a crisis was gone, absorbed by the giant, sleepy sponge on his couch. The shower door opened down the hall, and Nina emerged, wrapped in a towel, steam billowing around her. Tyler's annoyance evaporated instantly. Why is Nash chopping carrots like he's defusing a bomb? She asked, drying her hair. They think Chills is a holy figure, Tyler muttered, walking over to wrap his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, inhaling the vanilla scent that grounded him more than any rodent ever could. I should fire them all. You can't, Nina grinned, leaning back into him. Who else would peel grapes for the anchor? Besides, we have a bigger problem than the capybara cult. What? Tyler asked, distractedly kissing her shoulder. I just got an email, Nina said, her voice turning serious. We're being audited. By OSHA. Apparently, someone reported unsafe decibel levels and hazardous working conditions during the night shift. Tyler stiffened. A federal audit? Meet Mr. Luther Pendergast, Nina said, holding up her phone. He's arriving at noon. And Tyler? You can't growl at him. He's the government. They don't scare. Chapter 27. The Auditor. Luther Pendergast was a man who looked like he was made entirely of beige cardstock. He wore a beige suit, carried a beige briefcase, and had a face that was aggressively unmemorable. He stood in the lobby of Summit Logistics, tapping a pen against a clipboard with a rhythmic click, click, click that was driving the receptionist, Vivian, to the brink of a shift. Nina and Tyler stepped off the elevator. Nina had forced Tyler into his most harmless CEO outfit, a light blue sweater and glasses. He looked like a muscular librarian. Mr. Pendergast, Nina beamed, extending a hand. I'm Nina Hart, Chief of Operations. This is Mr. Sharp. Pendergast didn't smile. He looked at Nina's hand, then at Tyler. He adjusted his spectacles. Mr. Sharp, you have a firm grip. Your knuckles are bruised. Boxing? Gardening, Tyler lied through his teeth, his jaw tight. Aggressive weeds. Pendergast hummed, making a note. I am here to inspect the facility regarding the noise complaints and the alleged cult-like atmosphere reported by a former contract worker. Cult-like? Nina laughed, a high, tinkling sound. Oh, you must mean our team-building exercises. We are very big on corporate synergy here at Summit. Synergy, Pendergast repeated flatly. Shall we proceed to the warehouse floor? The tour was a disaster waiting to happen. As they walked through the massive double doors, the warehouse was bustling. Nina had sent a memo earlier. No growling, no sniffing, no superhuman strength. The result was hilarious. 300-pound werewolves were gingerly lifting 50-pound boxes with exaggerated effort, pretending they were heavy. Nash was driving a forklift at 2 miles per hour, sweating profusely as he tried to look human. Your workforce is large, Pendergast noted, watching a man named Brutus accidentally rip a cardboard box in half because he gripped it too hard. We hire for durability, Tyler said, stepping in front of Pendergast to block his view of Brutus frantically taping the box back together. Heavy lifting requires sturdy frames. And the diet? Pendergast stopped by the break room. I reviewed your expense reports. You spend $40,000 a month on raw meat. Tyler froze. Nina stepped in. The keto diet, she exclaimed. It's a company-wide health initiative. High protein, very trendy. We find it reduces afternoon fatigue. Pendergast narrowed his eyes. He walked over to the communal fridge and opened it. Inside, there were no sandwiches, just stacks of raw steaks wrapped in butcher paper and one Tupperware container labeled Chills, Kale. And who, Pendergast asked, lifting the Tupperware, is Chills? An intern, Tyler said quickly. He's vegan. Pendergast stared at the container. Then he looked at Tyler. I would like to interview this intern to ensure labor compliance. Nina felt the blood drain from her face. He's working remotely today. I can wait, Pendergast said, sitting down at the break room table. He pulled out a stopwatch. I have time. Chapter 28. The Compliance Breach. The standoff in the break room lasted 20 minutes. Pendergast sat like a stone statue, waiting for the vegan intern to appear. Tyler was vibrating with the urge to throw the auditor through a window. We have to produce him, Nina whispered to Tyler in the hallway. If we don't, he'll dig deeper. He'll find the safe room. Or the armory. He's a rodent, Nina, Tyler hissed. He can't fill out a W-2 form. He doesn't have to, Nina plotted, her mind racing. He just has to exist. Pendergast is looking for labor violations. If Chills is an emotional support officer, he's technically staff. You want to introduce the government to the capybara? It's our only play. Nash, go get the suit. 10 minutes later, the door to the break room opened. Nash walked in, looking solemn. Mr. Pendergast? The intern has arrived. Pendergast looked up, pen poised. Chills waddled into the room. He was wearing his custom-made Summit Logistics t-shirt and a tiny ID badge clipped to his collar that read, Chills, Chief Morale Officer. Pendergast stared. He lowered his pen. He looked at the capybara, who walked straight over to the auditor, sniffed his beige pant leg, and sat down on his foot. This, Pendergast said slowly, is your intern? He is the Chief Morale Officer, Nina corrected, stepping forward. He is paid in organic produce and housing. His employment contract is fully compliant with animal welfare statutes. Pendergast looked down at Chills. Chills looked up at Pendergast. The capybara let out a long, contented sigh and closed his eyes, resting his heavy head on Pendergast's shoe. For the first time, the auditor's face cracked. A strange twitch occurred near his mouth. He is surprisingly heavy, Pendergast noted. He carries the weight of the company, Tyler said, deadpan. Pendergast reached down hesitantly. He touched the capybara's bristly fur. Chills leaned into the touch, vibrating with a low purr. The tension in the room broke. Pendergast sighed, his shoulders slumping. I have a guinea pig at home. His name is Herbert. Herbert, Tyler repeated, trying to sound interested. Yes, he is much smaller. This is a magnificent specimen. Pendergast scratched Chills behind the ear. Very well. If the staff is happy and the intern is well-fed, I suppose the noise complaints are unfounded. Perhaps just exuberant team building. Exactly, Nina smiled, mentally canceling her plans to flee the country. Pendergast stood up, gently dislodging Chills. I will close the file, but, Mr. Sharp, please tell your men to stop growling at the delivery trucks. It's unsettling. I'll issue a memo, Tyler promised. As Pendergast left, Nash rushed over to pick up Chills. Did you see that? The anchor charmed the Fed. He is invincible. Tyler looked at Nina. We are never getting rid of that rat. He just saved us a federal investigation, Nina laughed, leaning against Tyler. I think he deserves a raise. Chapter 29. The Family Invasion. Just as life at the penthouse settled into a rhythm, Tyler running the empire, Nina managing the image, and Chills running the cult, the real threat arrived. It wasn't a monster. It was Linda Hart. We're downstairs, Nina's mother chirped into the phone. Your father brought his tools. He wants to check the plumbing in this fancy building of yours. And Kyle wants to film a house tour. No, Nina shouted, but the elevator was already dinging. Vivian let us up, Linda chirped through the intercom before the line went dead. The doors opened, and the Hart family spilled into the wolf's den. Linda was carrying a casserole. Frank had a tool belt strapped over his jeans. Kyle was holding a ring light. Mom, Dad, Nina said, trying to block their view of Nash, who was currently cleaning a gun on the dining table. Nash panicked, threw a tablecloth over the weapon, and smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Who's the giant? Frank asked, squinting at Nash. That's Nash, Nina said quickly. He's the butler. A butler? Linda gasped. Oh, Nina, you really have moved up. Does he do windows? Nash looked at Tyler, who had just walked in from the office. Tyler looked at Nash. The head of security, a man who had killed rivals with his bare hands, straightened his tie. I do windows, ma'am, Nash lied, his voice deep as a canyon. And I specialize in dust elimination. Wonderful! Linda handed him the casserole. Heat this up, dear. 350 degrees. Tyler walked over to Frank. Frank, good to see you. Tyler! Frank slapped the billionaire on the back. Nice place. A bit much on the glass, though. Bad for insulation. You losing heat in the winter? We manage, Tyler smiled. He genuinely liked Frank. Frank was simple. He smelled like motor oil and honesty. "Hey, can I film the view?" Kyle asked, pushing past them. "This is viral gold." "Kyle, no filming," Nina warned. "NDA, remember?" "Chill, Nina. I just want to show the followers the alpha lifestyle." Kyle laughed at his own joke, unaware that he was standing in a room with 4 actual alphas. Suddenly, a splash echoed from the hallway. "What was that?" Linda asked. "Plumbing!" Nina yelled. "Dad, go check the plumbing!" But it was too late. Chills came trotting out of the guest room. He was dripping wet from his heated pool. He shook himself vigorously, spraying water all over Kyle's ring light and Linda's blowout. "Oh my God!" Linda shrieked. "Is that the rat? Why is it wet?" "He has a pool," Tyler admitted, watching Kyle try to dry his phone. "A pool?" Frank stared. "You gave the rodent a pool? Inside? Do you know the humidity issues that causes? The mold potential?" Frank looked at Tyler with a new expression. It wasn't awe anymore. It was concern. "Son," Frank said, putting a hand on Tyler's shoulder, "I think you have more money than sense. Let me look at your ventilation, before the rot sets in." Tyler Sharp, the Wolf King of Chicago, looked at the retired mechanic. "Please," Tyler said earnestly, "check the vents. I think the capybara is clogging them." Chapter 30. The Unspoken Question. Dinner was a surreal affair. They sat at the long obsidian dining table. The Hart family, Tyler, Nina, and Nash, who was forced to serve the casserole because he was the butler. The culture clash was immense. Linda kept asking Nash why he was so big. "Vitamins," he grunted. Kyle kept trying to sneak photos of Tyler's watch. Frank was lecturing Tyler on the importance of changing HVAC filters, but beneath the domestic comedy, Nina felt a tension radiating from her mother. Linda wasn't eating. She was watching Tyler and Nina with a hawk's eye. When plates were cleared, Linda leaned forward. "So," she began, the tone dropping to that serious pitch mothers use before asking invasive questions. "You two are living together. You have a shared pet with a swimming pool. You have a butler." "Yes, Mom," Nina said, bracing herself. "And Tyler," Linda turned her gaze on him, "you clearly adore her. I've seen the way you look at her, like she's the only water in a desert." Tyler didn't flinch. He reached out and took Nina's hand on the table. "She is." "Good," Linda nodded. "Then when is it happening?" "When is what happening?" Kyle asked, mouthful of bread. "The wedding," Linda said bluntly. "And not just a wedding, the future. Nina is nearly 30. You are a CEO. What are the intentions here? Are we looking at a summer wedding? Fall? And what about children? Because if you have children with that jawline, they'll be models, but they need structure." Nina choked on her water. "Mom, we've been dating for a month." "With the mate bond, a month is an eternity," Tyler murmured, mostly to himself. "What?" Frank asked. "Nothing." Tyler cleared his throat. He looked at Linda. He sat up straighter, the alpha presence filling the room, silencing the table. "Mrs. Hart," Tyler said, his voice solemn, "my intentions are absolute. Nina is my partner in everything. There is no one else. There never will be. As for the wedding, I would marry her tonight if she let me." Nina looked at him, shocked. He wasn't joking. His gray eyes were burning with sincerity. "Well," Linda clapped her hands, tearing up. "That's all I needed to hear. Frank, leave the boy alone about the vents. He's family." Frank nodded approvingly. "He needs better insulation, but he's got a good heart." As the family packed up to leave an hour later, Nina stood by the door with Tyler. "You really charmed them," she whispered. "I told them the truth," Tyler said, watching the elevator doors close. "About the wedding?" Nina asked, her heart thumping. Tyler turned to her. He pulled her close, his hands warm on her waist. "Every word, but we have a problem." "What?" Your dad found something in the vents, Tyler said darkly. He thought it was a broken sensor, so he left it on the counter for me to check. Tyler held up a small, blinking device. It wasn't a tracker, it was a listening device, and it didn't belong to Bryce. Someone else is listening, Tyler whispered. The vacuum has been filled. Chapter 31. The Frequency of Betrayal. The blinking red light on the kitchen counter pulsed like a tiny, malignant heartbeat. It was a listening device, sleek, military-grade, and smaller than a dime. It sat next to Linda's leftover casserole, a stark contrast between domestic warmth and cold espionage. Tyler stared at it, his hands gripping the edge of the granite island. It's shielded, military-grade, silent frequency. That's why I didn't hear the hum. The gray in his eyes was gone, swallowed by a furious, molten gold. Someone has been in my walls, Tyler said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. In my home, where you sleep, and they used ozone scrubbers to mask their scent. I didn't smell a thing. Nina stood beside him, her arms crossed, her mind racing faster than a stock ticker. Dad said he found it in the return vent. That means whoever planted it had physical access. They didn't break in, Tyler. They had a key. Nash, Tyler growled, turning toward the hallway. No. Nina stopped him, grabbing his arm. Nash worships the ground Chills walks on. He wouldn't betray the pack. Think, Tyler. Who was here? Who was in this kitchen yesterday morning, pretending to be part of the celebration? Tyler paused. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The anger drained away, replaced by a cold, sharp betrayal. Vivian, he whispered. She was standing right there, next to the counter. Vivian, the nervous, efficient receptionist who had worked for Summit for 5 years. The human woman who always had Tyler's coffee ready and smiled shyly at Nina. She's the gatekeeper, Nina said, her stomach twisting. If she's been compromised, she hasn't just planted a bug. She's sold the blueprints to your life. Why? Tyler asked, pacing the room. I pay her double the market rate. She has full benefits. Money isn't the only currency, Nina said, pulling out her phone. She typed a message quickly and shoved the screen in Tyler's face. It is transmitting. Don't react. They are listening now. Tyler read the screen. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. He looked at the bug, then back at Nina. Nina typed again. We feed them a lie. Follow my lead. She nodded at him, her eyes flashing with a predator's intent. She put the phone away and leaned in close to the bug, pitching her voice to sound panicked and breathless. Oh, Tyler, she said, pitching her voice to sound panicked and breathless. I can't believe the soul pearl isn't actually in Mongolia. I can't believe it's been in the safe in the warehouse basement this whole time. Tyler stared at her, confused for a microsecond, before he caught on. He leaned in, his voice rough. Quiet, Nina. No one can know. If the rogues found out the source of the Fox's powers in Sector 4, sitting unguarded, we would be ruined. Nina winked at him. Somewhere in the city, the trap was set. Now, they just had to wait for the rats to come for the cheese. Chapter 32. The Midnight Shift. The warehouse at midnight was a cathedral of shadows and steel. Summit Logistics Sector 4 was usually a hive of activity, but tonight, Nina had ordered a system maintenance shutdown. The floor was empty, save for the hum of the conveyor belts and the distant drip of a leaky pipe. Nina and Tyler sat in the control booth, watching the security monitors. Nash and the security team were concealed inside empty shipping crates stacked along the main aisle, waiting for the signal. Do you think they bought it? Tyler asked, adjusting the earpiece. He was wearing his tactical gear again, black on black, looking every inch the alpha. Vivian logged into the secure server 5 minutes after our performance in the kitchen, Nina replied, watching the screens. She downloaded the floor plan for Sector 4. She sent it to an encrypted IP address. They're coming. Who is they? We're about to find out. At 12:45 a.m., the South Bay doors hissed open. The electronic lock had been overridden. Shadows slipped into the warehouse. There were 12 of them. They moved with a fluid, predatory grace that confirmed they weren't human. They were wolves, rogue wolves, wearing mismatched tactical gear and carrying duffel bags. Leading them was a man with a jagged scar running down the side of his face. He sniffed the air, sneering. "Killian," Tyler hissed, his hand tightening on the console. "An exiled alpha from the Detroit territories. He's been trying to claw his way back into power for years. He thinks if he controls the Pearl, he controls the Fox. He wants to enslave Bryce to fight me." "Too bad the only thing in the safe is a bowling ball I painted with glitter glue," Nina whispered. Down on the floor, Killian signaled his men. They moved toward the heavy steel door of the main secure vault. Killian placed a charge of C4 on the lock. Boom! The door blew inward. The rogues cheered and rushed inside. "Now," Nina commanded. Tyler hit a button on the console. The heavy blast doors behind the rogues slammed shut, trapping them in the main corridor. At the same time, the warehouse lights flared to blinding white. "Welcome to Summit Logistics." Nina's voice boomed over the PA system. "We regret to inform you that your package has been delayed due to extreme stupidity." From the rafters, Nash and the Summit Pack dropped. They didn't shift. They didn't need to. They landed with the heavy thud of superior force. Killian spun around, snarling. "It's a trap." "It's an audit," Tyler corrected, stepping out of the shadows, his eyes glowing gold. "And you failed." The fight that followed was brutal, short, and efficient. But just as Tyler moved to pin Killian, a small, furry shape waddled out from behind a stack of pallets. It was Chills. He had apparently fallen asleep in the back of the SUV and wandered in, looking for a snack. Killian froze. He saw the Alpha. He saw the security team, and then he saw a capybara wearing a t-shirt that said, "Chief Morale Officer." Killian blinked. "What is—" That second of confusion was all Tyler needed. He delivered a right hook that knocked the rogue Alpha unconscious before he even hit the floor. Chapter 33. The Exit Interview. The aftermath of the Battle of Sector 4 was mostly paperwork. The rogue wolves were zip-tied and lined up against a wall of shipping containers. Nash was currently lecturing a young rogue about the importance of proper footwear in an industrial environment. Tyler stood over Killian, who was groaning as he woke up. "You have two choices," Tyler said, his voice cold. "One, I hand you over to the council. They will strip you of your rank and exile you to a territory with no deer and terrible Wi-Fi. Two, you tell me who gave you the codes." Killian spat blood on the concrete. "Your receptionist, Vivian. She said you were careless. She said you left the Pearl unguarded in the Sector 4 vault." Tyler looked at Nina, who was currently feeding a carrot to Chills while simultaneously typing a press release on her phone to explain the minor explosion to the local precinct. "She was wrong," Tyler said. "My mate didn't distract me. She designed the cage you're sitting in." Tyler turned to Nash. "Ship them." "Destination?" Nash asked, pulling out his scanner. "We have a cargo ship heading to Antarctica with supplies for a research station," Tyler mused. "I hear they need sled dogs, or just labor." "Done," Nash nodded. Later, back at the office tower, Vivian arrived for work at 8 a.m. sharp. She found her desk cleared out. Sitting on her chair was a single box. Inside was the listening device she had planted, crushed into a fine powder, and a severance check for exactly $0. Nina stood in the doorway of Tyler's office. "Vivian." The receptionist jumped, dropping her purse. She looked at Nina, then at the empty desk. She turned pale. Vivian stammered. "I have a sick mother. Killian promised to pay for her surgery." "And you thought selling out a werewolf pack was the safe way to get money?" Nina asked, shaking her head. "If you had asked, Tyler would have paid for the surgery. That's what a pack does. But you bet against us." Vivian started to cry. "Please, don't kill me." "We're not killers," Nina said, checking her nails. "We're corporate. I've blacklisted you from every administrative job in the tri-state area. You won't be able to get hired to answer a phone at a pizza place.
Security will escort you out. Nash stepped forward, looking disappointed. I liked you, Vivian. You made good coffee. Shame. As Vivian was led away, sobbing, Tyler walked up behind Nina and wrapped his arms around her. Ruthless, he murmured admiringly into her ear. I would have just growled at her. My way hurts longer, Nina replied, leaning back into him. Now, are we done with the villains? Because I have a wedding to plan, and my mother is threatening to hire a DJ who uses a fog machine. Chapter 34. The Proposal. 3 months later, the threats were a distant memory. Bryce was reportedly still wandering around South America looking for his package. Killian was shoveling snow in Antarctica. Summit Logistics stock was at an all-time high. Nina came home to the penthouse after a long day of meetings. She kicked off her heels and called out, Honey, I'm home! Don't tell me Chills ate the remote again. Silence greeted her. Tyler? The lights in the living room dimmed. The floor-to-ceiling windows, which usually showed the Chicago skyline, were dark. Suddenly, a single spotlight clicked on, illuminating the center of the room. Chills was sitting there. He was wearing a tuxedo. A new one, custom-tailored, and balanced on his flat, blocky head was a small velvet pillow. Chills? Nina laughed, walking forward. What are you doing, buddy? You look like a very hairy waiter. Chills let out a soft weep and stayed perfectly still, a testament to either his training or his laziness. Tyler stepped out of the shadows. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, barefoot, stripped of his corporate armor. He looked nervous. The alpha who could stare down an army of rogues was fidgeting with his hands. Nina, he started, his voice thick with emotion. I had a speech. I wrote it down, but Chills ate it about 10 minutes ago. Nina giggled, tears already pricking her eyes. Improvise, then. Tyler took a deep breath. He walked over to her and dropped to one knee. He didn't take the ring from the pillow on Chill's head yet. He just took her hands. Before you, he said, looking up at her with those stormy gray eyes. My life was logistics. It was tracking numbers, profit margins, and territories. It was cold. It was lonely. I thought I was the apex predator, but I was just a man alone in a tower. He squeezed her hands. You crashed into my life with a broken phone and a giant rat. You yelled at me. You commanded my pack. You saved my soul when the world tried to tear it apart. You aren't just my mate, Nina. You are my logic. You are my calm. You are the only person who has ever made me feel safe. He reached over and gently took the ring from Chill's head. It was a massive diamond, emerald cut, flanked by 2 shards of raw obsidian. I am yours, Tyler whispered. My pack is yours. My heart is yours. Will you marry me? Will you be the Luna of this chaotic, ridiculous family? Nina looked at him. She looked at Chills, who was now sniffing her discarded shoes. She looked at the ring. Yes, she choked out. Yes, you idiot! Of course! Tyler slid the ring onto her finger. He stood up and kissed her, lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. From the kitchen, hidden behind the island, Nash, Marcus, and the entire security team popped up. She said yes! Nash roared, popping a bottle of champagne that sprayed everywhere. We knew it! Marcus yelled, high-fiving Vivian's replacement. Tyler broke the kiss, groaning. I told you guys to stay hidden. The anchor sensed the moment, Nash defended, tossing a piece of kale to Chills. Chapter 35. The Happy Chaos. The wedding of the century took place on the rooftop of Summit Tower. It was a strange affair. Half the guests were human socialites, friends of the Harts. The other half were werewolves in uncomfortable suits who kept sniffing the hors d'oeuvres before eating them. Linda Hart was in her element, directing the photographer and critiquing the floral arrangements. Frank Hart was cornered by Victor, the elder wolf, discussing the structural integrity of the pergola. Surprisingly, they were getting along famously. You see, you need a galvanized bolt for that load,
Frank explained. Indeed, Victor nodded solemnly. Strength is paramount. When the music started, the guests stood. First down the aisle was the ring bearer. Chills walked slowly, with immense dignity, down the white runner. He was wearing a gold bow tie. He stopped halfway to eat a flower from a guest's bouquet, causing a ripple of laughter, before continuing to the altar where Tyler waited. Tyler looked devastatingly handsome, but his eyes were locked on the archway. Then, Nina appeared. She wasn't wearing white. She wore a gown of pale, shimmering silver that looked like moonlight woven into silk. She walked down the aisle not as a blushing bride, but as a queen. Her head was high, her smile radiant. When she reached Tyler, he didn't wait for the priest. He reached out and pulled her to him, disregarding the script. "You look dangerous," he whispered. "I am," she whispered back. "I'm the Luna." The vows were spoken. The rings were exchanged. Once Nash pried the box out of Chill's mouth, as he had decided it was a chew toy. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," the cheer that went up wasn't just applause. It was a howl. A joyous, uncontained howl from the summit employees that echoed over the Chicago skyline. The humans looked confused, but they clapped along, assuming it was some weird rich people tradition. As the party raged into the night, Kyle filming TikToks with the werewolves, Linda dancing with Nash, Tyler pulled Nina to the edge of the roof, away from the noise. They looked out over the city. Their city. "We made it," Nina said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "We did," Tyler agreed. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest. "No more threats. No more bugs. Just us." "And the rat," Nina reminded him, pointing to the dance floor. Chills was currently in the center of a circle of dancing wolves, spinning slowly in a circle while they cheered him on. Tyler laughed, a sound of pure joy. "And the rat." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Nina Hart." "I love you, Tyler Sharp." She looked at her phone. She opened the contact list. She finally deleted the entry for the ATM. She typed in a new name. My Alpha. She slipped the phone into her pocket, turned around, and dragged her husband back onto the dance floor. The end.